Chapter 108. Since Lu Qingdi wanted to read it in advance, Chen Zhengmin naturally presented it to him respectfully. In this imperial examination, if one could write well, then even if the content was not as good, he would still score better than someone who wrote poorly. After all, when the examiners read the papers, the first thing they looked at was the quality of the writing. Only if the writing was good would they be in the mood to continue reading. As long as the content was not too bad, there was still hope. On the other hand, if the writing was bad, the examiners would not want to look at it a second time and would probably reject it directly. Thus, no matter how good the writing was, the examiners would not even look at it. What else could one hope for? Lu Qingdi had already read Chen Jingmin's writing. Naturally, it was not bad. In the beginning, he was rather nonchalant. He shared the same opinion as most of the courtiers. In such a short period of time, even if Chen Jingmin went down and carefully pondered over it, he would not have improved that much. However, gradually, Lu Qingdi's expression became serious. He could not help but sit up straighter. Seeing Lu Qingdi's reaction, the courtiers looked at each other. It seemed to be a little unexpected. Then many people looked at Chen Jingmin again. He was sitting upright with his eyebrows lowered. He was not happy that Lu Qingdi was the first one to read it, nor was he nervous. He was even unmoved by favor or humiliation. At such a young age, was there going to be a second Sun Yilin? Compared to when he read Sun Yilin's essay, Lu Qingdi's reading speed was slower. It seemed that he was still thinking about some parts. Could it be that he wrote better than Sun Yilin? If that was the case, then it was really amazing. Although Lu Qingdi took a longer time, he did not show any joy. It was hard to tell. My dear courtiers, please take a look. Lu Qingdi asked the chamberlain to take the essays to the courtiers again. The court examination was the same as the previous examinations. There was a time limit. As time passed, more and more people finished. Naturally, there were also those who were affected by the lack of mental fortitude. The more flustered they were, the worse they would be, and the worse they would be. It seemed like they would end up at the bottom of the list. Sun Yilin's and Chen Jingmin's essays had been passed around by the courtiers. Lu Qingdi ordered his men to collect a few more articles. Of course, the closer the article was to the front, the higher the chance of being selected. Lu Qingdi couldn't help but nod at some of them. Luo Aiqing, did Chen Jingmin ask you about this question? Replying to your majesty, I haven't. Chen Jingmin had gotten this question from Sun Yilin. Moreover, after learning that Sun Yilin liked his fiancée and wanted to snatch her away, Chen Jingmin didn't bring this question to Luo Peishan, probably because of his competitive nature. Lu Qingdi nodded. Speaking of which, Luo Aiqing's taste is indeed very good. Dear ministers, what do you think after seeing it? Dear Minister Wan, tell me about it first. Wan Ruiz Hong stroked his beard. Although some parts are still immature, there are many original points. Sun Bingbai's previous articles were full of vigor, but some parts were indeed a little too radical. The current article is obviously a supplement to the previous article. Combining the two, there is stability in the advancement and progress in the stability. It is truly rare. As for Chen Gongxing's previous articles, I do not know. Just based on this article alone, it is a combination of novelty and wonder. There is one point that is similar to Sun Bingbai's, and that is, there is no lack of youth's vigor. Lu Qingdi listened to the opinions of others. Naturally, he also listened to the opinions of his sons. In fact, for him, the opinions of his sons were even more important than the opinions of his ministers. Li Hongming's comments were reasonable, but he seemed to be biased towards Sun Yilin. Li Hongming's comments could be regarded as impartial, but he had his own opinions. Not bad. The Gong Prince was more outstanding in military affairs, but in terms of knowledge, he was a far cry from Li Hongyi. The sickly fifth was lying in bed again. Behind Li Hongyuan, the one ranked seventh had no interest in these things. The one ranked eighth had followed the second to become brothers in the netherworld. The two ranked last had only been involved in politics for a short time, so their answers were more or less seconded. The ones ranked last were not qualified to appear here for the time being. Old Sixth, what do you think? Lu Qingdi thought he would skip over someone, but he didn't expect that in the end, Lu Qingdi still chose Evil Abyss. Look at his worse sitting posture. He was so lazy and bored that he looked like he was about to fall asleep. Li Hongyuan raised his eyelids and slowly stood up. "Father Emperor, are you sure you want to listen to this, son?" Lu Qingdi choked. He really was looking for trouble. He waved his hand, telling him to quickly sit down. "Don't make a fool of yourself." Li Hongyuan's face had long been comparable to the city walls, and the ministers had long been used to it, so they didn't have the slightest reaction. Even those who secretly belonged to him had long been used to his two completely different styles. In fact, Li Hongyuan thought that if his father really wanted him to say something, he would be prepared to say a few words seriously. Now, whether it was Qin Jingmin or Sun Yilin, in his eyes, they were all young brats. To tell the truth, if it didn't involve Wan, these two people might be able to get his attention in another 10 years. Their views and opinions were still far from enough. Lu Qingdi did not rashly decide on Qin Jingmin's ranking. Instead, he asked the courtiers to quickly look through the other candidates. These candidates were all in the top 20. A few of them were popular candidates for the first rank. When the time was up, all the papers were collected. Although the emperor was personally present, no emperor would read hundreds of papers one by one. It was already good enough if he liked 20 papers, and those who needed to be selected by him were usually the top 3. Lu Qingdi asked a few people based on the papers he had read, and then he had a rough idea. In this court examination, the tribute student Qin Jingmin is the best, but because he solved this question before, he will be demoted. He will be given the 3rd place in the 1st grade, and will enter the Hanlin Academy as an editor. The tribute student Tyrannical, although his essay is slightly inferior, it is fair and upright, and has won my favor. He will be given the 1st place in the 1st grade, and will enter the Hanlin Academy as an editor. The tribute student Jiang Wei, whose essay is also of the highest quality, will be given the 2nd place in the 1st grade, and will enter the Hanlin Academy as an editor. The rest of the papers will be handed over to the Ministry of Personnel for evaluation and ranking as soon as possible. Top scorer Tyrannical, 3rd place in the general examination. 2nd place Jiang Wei, 2nd place in the general examination. 3rd place Qin Jingmin, 5th place in the general examination. Qin Jingmin's result was unexpected, but his final ranking was expected. After all, he was the youngest and most handsome among the top 10 in the general examination. It was said that the 3rd place was not only judged by one's knowledge, but also by one's appearance. It was said that after every court examination, the most popular person was not the top scorer or the 2nd place, but the 3rd place. Of course, to be able to enter the imperial court as an official, the most basic requirement was to have good facial features. In other words, the officials basically did not have ugly melons and cracked dates. Although the local officials did not have such strict requirements, if they really looked unsightly, it was absolutely not possible. Even if they relied on a solid background and could mix well in a region, they would not be able to become an official in the capital in their lifetime. The court examination was basically over. Great reward for great elder princess's birthday. Is there anyone among you who has the purse? Among the 300 people, there was indeed one person who had a purse. He was sitting in the middle and slightly in the front. He walked out of his original seat with excitement. "I'm lucky to have one. Come forward." When the young man walked to the front, Lu Qingdi asked casually. Then he took the purse from the young man's hand, opened it, and looked at the reward written on the note. "Go and get all the rewards prepared. Then ask the holders of the other 9 purses to come to the palace immediately." Lu Qingdi looked at the young man who tried to hide his joy, but could not stop himself. He laughed in his heart. Sure enough, there were few people like Sun Yilin. Take out his paper. If he can get the 2nd place, put him in the top 10. If he can only get the 3rd place, then let him do whatever he wants. In the final ranking of the court examination, as long as one did not offend anyone, the higher the ranking, the better the job, no matter if one stayed in the capital or was sent to other places. Moreover, there were about 120 people in the 2nd place of the Qi Yuan dynasty. The scholars of the Hanlin Academy were usually selected from the top 50 people, unless one had a special relationship. If one was out of the top 50 people, he or she would not be qualified to enter the Hanlin Academy. Those who are not from the Hanlin Academy cannot enter the cabinet. Although this was not necessarily the case in the Qiuan dynasty, after all, there were cabinet elders who were not from the Hanlin Academy. In Li Hongyuan's previous life, Sun Yilin was in this situation. However, this was generally a special case. As long as those who passed the Jinshu examination, there were not many who did not want to enter the Hanlin Academy. Lu Qingdi put him in the top 10. In addition, it was a reward from the emperor, so basically no one would make trouble. Therefore, it was almost certain that he would enter the Hanlin Academy. Even if he did not want to go to the Hanlin Academy and chose to go to other places, he had more priority than others. The young man was so excited that he clenched his fists. Many people were envious. Fortunately, among these people, only one had a purse. If there were more, Lu Qingdi would not dare to do this. After all, if there were more people, they would occupy more places for the outstanding ones. Who knew if other talents would be squeezed out by them? Of course, the premise was that the young man could enter the second place. The opportunity had been given. Whether or not he could seize it depended on his own ability. Although the reward could be given to others, if the person was really an idiot, it would be good enough to give the reward in the purse to him. There was no need to think about other benefits. If the idiot was really an idiot and offended Lu Qingdi, he might be punished. The young man's essay was found and read by the minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The old minister had read many essays before. There were good ones and bad ones. It was not the first time that he had invigilated the general examination and judged the court examination. Therefore, he had a rough estimate of all the essays this time. Your Majesty, this man's essay can enter the second place. This time he was really beaming with joy and was very excited. Perhaps there were some who couldn't understand this feeling, but the adults who had been through this step could understand it very well. To them, a single opportunity was sometimes really important. A single opportunity might be able to change the fate of a lifetime. The other 9 people soon entered the palace. This had nothing to do with the examinees. They could only watch with envy. Some people with a good attitude just regarded it as watching a fun show. Lu Qingdi asked the eunuch to check the notes in the purse and distribute the rewards one by one. Of course, each of the 10 things was precious. Of course, the more important value of these things was that they were rewarded by the emperor. They had to take good care of them when they took them back. This was their real meaning. Someone like Li Hongyuan, who was so used to bestowing rewards that his hands went soft, should not be mentioned in the same breath as him. Lu Qingdi was not in a hurry to give out other rewards. After all, it really depended on Lu Qingdi's mood. Who has the purse taken by Lord Lingluo? Sure enough, Lu Qingdi would not watch his sister be bullied for nothing. Your Majesty, it's me. A young man wearing a scholarly robe walked out. He looked to be about 14 or 15 years old, and was even younger than Qin Jingmin. He had a fair and clean appearance. It was unknown whether it was because he knew the origin of the pouch or because he was ashamed and angry. His cheeks were crimson red, and were even redder than a girl who had put on rouge. There was also a trace of stubbornness in his eyes. This person was out of Lu Qingdi's expectation. Lu Qingdi originally thought that the fat man with big ears who looked like a playboy was the one who got Lord Lingluo's purse. Lu Qingdi's first impression of him changed, and his previous bad feeling disappeared a lot. Lu Qingdi asked him some basic information. He was the grandson of Lord Lingluo's mother's sister. This relationship was really distant. Then he asked, "What are you good at?" The teenager pursed his lips and said, "Your Majesty, I grew up in the countryside with my grandmother since I was a child. I know all the farming." His words almost made everyone burst into laughter. Lu Qingdi also laughed, but he did not laugh at him. He just felt that this kid was as straightforward and simple as one of his sons. Seeing that the teenager's face was about to bleed, Lu Qingdi coughed and then stopped laughing.
Go on.
The teenager calmed down and continued, "I know that the villagers have a hard time using water. And I know that there is a thing called a water wheel in the south, so I wonder if it can be used in the north. After many efforts, I found the blueprint. After making the water wheel, it was not satisfactory. So I modified it, and the water wheel is quite good." "Boy, are you serious?" Before Lu Qingdi reacted, Mr. Zhong, the minister of the Ministry of Works, became excited. The teenager nodded and said, "Your Majesty, I dare not talk nonsense. I asked a carpenter to make a small one imitating the water wheel, and I happened to bring it into the palace. Go get it and let me have a look." Lu Qingdi didn't say anything when he saw his beloved official acting on her own initiative. As the saying goes, there are experts in every field. The small water wheel was not big, only about a foot tall. But after the teenager explained how it worked, Mr. Zhong's eyes lit up. "Your Majesty, this child can enter the Ministry of Works." Even if Lu Qingdi did not know much about it, he knew that this was something that would benefit the country and the people. Good. The teenager could not help but look happy. As long as there was no problem with his family background and he was valued by the Minister of the Ministry of Works, his future would not be bad. However, from his actions, it was clear that he had made preparations in advance. In the eyes of ordinary people, the things you do and know are not elegant. How did you think of showing them? Li Hongyuan's voice suddenly sounded. It would have been better if he did not ask. Now that he did, the others also had the same doubts. This commoner's ancestors were also from a scholarly family, but it started to decline from my grandfather's bad luck. This commoner's studies were also disappointing, but my grandmother had high hopes for me, hoping that our family could rise again. Not long ago, my grand-aunt sent this pouch. This commoner thought that I was incompetent and originally wanted to return the pouch, but an old uncle came to my home and told me to do so. When everyone heard this, how could they not understand? He had received advice from someone. Li Hongyuan rubbed his chin and said, "This prince is more curious. What are the others proficient in? Did they also receive advice from someone?" Lu Qingdi's curiosity was also piqued. After asking, he found out that half of the 8 people had received advice from someone, and none of them walked the right path. That fat-headed and big-eared young man looked like a good-for-nothing. He really was good for nothing. Moreover, he was a money grubber. However, this person had a special characteristic. He was especially good at reading account books. As long as he knew some basic things, he would be able to find out the slightest mistake in the account book. Moreover, he was also very good at arithmetic. As long as you read out a string of numbers, he would be able to give you the answer immediately. It was accurate and fast. He was simply born to enter the Ministry of Revenue. There was another person who did not look like a teenager at all. In fact, he was not a teenager. He was already in his early 30s. In his early years, he did not have any other hobbies but liked to travel. This time, he had almost traveled all over the country of the Qi Yuan dynasty and even many places around it. He basically remembered all the places he had been to. What county, what prefecture, what county, what village, whatever place he had been to, he could tell you where it was. Moreover, as long as he personally set foot in a place, he could clearly remember the characteristics and terrain of that place. A living map. Li Hongyuan could not help but mutter after hearing this. There was no need to worry about getting lost when marching and fighting. Of course, such a talent was not only used for this. He could be used in many other places. One of them had slightly blue eyes, and the bridge of his nose was higher than the average person. At first glance, one could tell that he had foreign blood. However, the Qi Yuan dynasty didn't care much about this, but it was relatively rare. In the aristocratic families, this was a taboo. If such a child appeared, he would not be welcomed. This person was from the same clan as the top scorer this time. He was also Xie cousin. His name was Xie Hui. Originally, the purse did not fall into his hands. It was given to another member of the Xie family. He had a good relationship with Xie Hui. That member of the Xie family was favored by the Xie family, but in fact, he did not have any special characteristics. The person who approached the Xie family suggested to give the purse to Xie Hui. Xie Hui's special characteristic was his talent in languages. He could speak many different languages around the Qi Yuan dynasty. He could even speak and understand more than 6 foreign languages, not to mention those who could speak or read. Even the most powerful person in the Honglu Temple would not be able to compare with him. The last person was born and grew up by the sea, because his father was an official in a place near the sea. Later on, he even went to the sea. What was his special characteristic or what he was good at? This commoner has gone to the sea more than 30 times. Everyone more or less fell sick, but this commoner has never fallen sick. Healthy body. What does this mean? After being an official in a place near the sea, this young man was definitely not simple. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes. In his previous life, he had sent people to the sea. The first time was the most tragic. Almost all of them were wiped out. Although the situation was much better later on, there were more or less problems. Those who went to the sea several times in a row would fall sick, at least once or twice. Although he could not rule out the possibility that this young man went to the sea not far away, it was definitely not a coincidence that he went to the sea more than 30 times. After summarizing, he found that these people did not think that they were bad at first. Only Tyrannical did not have a chance. Now that he had a chance, he was enlightened by someone. They were all really talented, great talents. The other people who were not enlightened were all people who relied on reading. They were not very outstanding. Before the characteristics of people who walked the crooked path were discovered and were not valued, the scholars seemed to despise the crooked path. But now, those scholars showed their mediocrity. They did not have the good luck of that scholar. At most, they were in front of Luqingdi in name and waited for the imperial examination in the future. But at least 3 years later, would Luqingdi still remember who they were? Maybe there would be a new person on the throne. Who is the person who enlightened you? As the saying goes, a horse of 1,000 miles is common, but a beau lo is not common. It was a pity that such a beau lo was buried in the dark. Not only Luqingdi wanted to know this question, but other people also wanted to know this question. Your Majesty, although this commoner is not sure, this commoner has a guess. The chubby young man said. Tell me quickly. This commoner was curious at that time. After asking and getting no answer, I sent someone to secretly follow that person, and that person finally entered the mansion of the Minister of the Ministry of Rights, Lord Luo. Luo Peishan, who was waiting for the answer with interest like others, did not expect that it would fall on his head. While Luo Peishan was still a little stunned, almost everyone's eyes fell on him. Minister Luo, Your Majesty, it was not me. Luo Peishan did not know whether to laugh or cry. Your Majesty, it was the third miss of the Luo family who proposed the 10 rewards, so was the person who gave the suggestion also sent by the third miss of the Luo family? When the third miss of the Luo family made the suggestion, she was not selfish at all. After all, with her status, she probably just gave the suggestion to Great Elder Princess and did not expect to be agreed. She just did not expect that Great Elder Princess would agree. Sierenhui lowered his head slightly and said, even so, she thought more than others and was more selfless. Is there any reason to believe that she thought more after the event, more than others could think of? Hearing this, many courtiers nodded. It should be noted that all the important courtiers present had attended the birthday banquet of Great Elder Princess, so they definitely had a deep impression of the third miss of the Luo family. Oh, Minister Luo, you don't know anything about this matter? Your Majesty, I really don't know anything about it. Luo Peishan now wanted to scold Jingwan even more. My dear granddaughter, you have made a big noise, and a large group of people have been watching you. Can't you stop? Do you really want me to be surrounded by a pack of wolves? Well, in fact, it was already surrounded by a pack of wolves. In fact, it was really Jingwan who did this. It was just 10 pouches. Because they had to find the emperor to receive the reward, the range of the reward would not exceed the scope of the capital. It was not difficult to know who the 10 pouches ended up in. Spending some effort to find out the situation of these people, as well as the situation of the people around them, was not difficult. However, it was difficult to know the specific situation of those who were promoted in this way, compared with those who were not very outstanding. So, it was not appropriate for Jingwan, a girl of the boudoir, to inquire about the situation of a group of men. Even if her intention was good, if it was spread out, she would definitely be criticized. In addition, she did not want to let others know, so she naturally acted carefully. First, she listed the situations of these people one by one. Those who did not need to do anything, those who could be privately persuaded to give it to others, and those who probably did not realize that their abilities were actually very useful. There were 5 of the first situation, one of the second situation, and 4 of the last situation. It could be said that it was very tiring. Then, she asked Nanny Gong to arrange for trustworthy and inconspicuous people to visit them one by one without attracting the attention of others and analyze the situation for them. It could be said that it was tiring both mentally and physically, and she also had to bear the risk of damaging her reputation. It was a typical case of doing good deeds without leaving a name. Nanny Gong also asked her why she did this. It's probably because she wanted to finish what she started. Her original intention was to give some people a chance. Since this opportunity really exists, naturally, she should not waste it. Moreover, isn't it good to let the country have more talents? Good. Of course it was good. In Li Hongyuan's previous life, he knew that Wanwan was a righteous person. If given a chance, she would do a lot of things for the Qi Yuan dynasty, and she would definitely not do worse than any man. In other words, women were better than men. She quietly did not seek fame or benefits, but how could Li Hongyuan agree? If it was just Nanny Gong who inquired about it, naturally, she would not get accurate information so quickly. However, he handed this matter over to the secret guards and directly handed it over to Nanny Gong and did not report it to him. Therefore, without him knowing, Wanwan really dug out a few talents. It seemed that small people could not be ignored and must be valued in the future. As for her reputation, as long as Lu Qingdi said well done, who would dare to criticize her? If Li Hongyuan wanted to raise her to the highest position, naturally, he would not just let her have an empty title. He wanted the whole country to really respect and admire her, both inside and outside the court. It was not only because she could subdue Li Hongyuan. In fact, he did not need to fabricate anything for her. As long as he gave her a chance to show off and let the world know what she had done, then when the time came, she would naturally be able to sit on the throne. Luo Aiqing, when will you let me see your granddaughter? Your Majesty, you can see her at any time. However, since the Emperor had personally summoned her, she could not stop. Good, very good. Lu Qingdi was very happy. Luo Aiqing, I remember you said that you dealt with your granddaughter's purse. Who did you give it to in the end? Luo Peishan glanced at the 9 people, and one of the scholars stood up. Your Majesty, it was this commoner who did it. Lu Qingdi looked at him, and then looked at Luo Peishan. Luo Aiqing, your eyes are far inferior to your granddaughter's. Luo Peishan apologized again and again. Originally, he wanted to give a mediocre person a chance. If he had known that his granddaughter would find another way, he would have specially looked for such a strange talent. This person was the child of one of his younger brother's favorite disciples. When he first came to the capital, he asked him to take care of him. However, this child was really mediocre. It was not easy to get such a chance, but it was a bit self-defeating. But could he blame Jingwan? Of course not. In the end, she did not choose the owner of the purse. She just chose a fine horse among the horses that others did not think highly of. If it was not the owner of the fine horse, how could you blame Bo Le? However, if there was no fine horse, everyone would have an equal chance. They would either advance or retreat together. Now, there were 6 people advancing and 4 retreating. On second thought, if it was not for Jingwan's initial proposal, they would not even have the chance to appear. In the end, it was up to them whether they felt resentful or grateful. And the person who received the Luo family's purse was also very ashamed. His face was red. It is a waste of Miss Luo's good intentions to let you go back like this. The 4 of you are all scholars. 1 of you failed this year, and the other 3 did not take the exam. How about this? I will allow you to study in the Imperial College for 3 years. After 3 years, it will all depend on you. Originally, they thought that there was no hope. They did not expect to be surprised at the moment of despair. There were 3 kinds of students in the Imperial College of the Qi Yuan dynasty. The first was the children of officials of the 4th rank and above. From the 4th rank to the 3rd rank, the family could send 1 person. For those of the 2nd rank and above, the family could send 2 people. The second was the children of nobles. The so-called students who relied on their father's title to obtain the opportunity to enter the Imperial College could send 1 to 5 people. The third was a group of outstanding scholars in the capital. There was a limit to the number of places. Although the first 2 places could be given as a gift, how many people would give such precious places to ordinary people? After all, there were many children in every family. It could be imagined how difficult it was to enter the Imperial College. The Imperial College was naturally the highest educational institution in the Qi Yuan dynasty. Whether it was the quality of the teachers or other aspects, it was absolutely top-notch. It could not be compared to the Imperial College. If they could enter the Imperial College for 3 years, they would definitely gain a lot. Thank you, Your Majesty. There is no need to thank me. You know who you should thank in your hearts. All right, let's stop here. The next highlight of the show was naturally the parade of the 3 people who passed the first-rank Imperial Scholar. Because it was much later than the previous years, the designated parade streets were already crowded. Everyone stretched their necks, waiting to see the glory of this year's Imperial College. Was the top scholar tall and handsome? Was the second-place scholar with a white beard like 3 years ago? As for the third-place scholar, it was said that the third-place scholar was the most handsome. The one from 3 years ago was not very satisfactory. Chapter 109. Even though she had lived in this world for more than 10 years, Jingwan had only heard about the grand occasion where the top scholar, the second scholar, and the third scholar paraded through the streets. It was only her first year in the capital, and she had already encountered such a lively event. Naturally, she wanted to join in. It had to be said that in this imperial examination, there were 3 people in the first place, while the first, second, and third places were the real deal. Moreover, there was only one every 3 years. It was unlike his previous life, where there were many top scorers here and there. What were the second and third place scorers? He had never heard of them, and there were new ones every year. Alright, he had to admit that they were also very good. However, in comparison, this imperial examination was much more difficult, right? All the examinees in the country from a few years ago, more than 10 years ago, and even decades ago, were all gathered together. It was like thousands of soldiers fighting over a single log bridge. As for the specifics, Jingwon had not personally experienced it, so she did not comment. She just watched and enjoyed it. Jingwan and the others came from the minister's residence, so they had already booked a good restaurant. Anyway, at this time, the people on both sides of the street, no matter what business they were doing, did not think about making money. They just wanted to watch the fun. As for the restaurants, tea houses, and private rooms, they had already been booked by the officials and nobles. Of course, they could take advantage of this to make a profit. After all, other than the private rooms, it was not easy to raise the price for the nobles. There was also the main hall below. At this time, even if the price was a little higher, no one would bargain. Even those jewelry stores, rouge and powder stores, as long as the second and third floors were basically occupied. Of course, most of these places were still occupied by women of high status. When they left, they would probably take away a lot of things that would make the shopkeepers smile from ear to ear. In the process of waiting, if there was nothing to do, they would eat some food, drink some tea, and chat idly. Because of special reasons, the place was only so big, but there were too many people watching the fun, so it was inevitable that they would share a place with others. For example, in this private room of the Luo family, there were many juniors of the Luo family's relatives and friends. Fortunately, relatives could occasionally meet each other, and there were many people, so there was no need to pay special attention to the boundaries between men and women. Even so, there was a clear distinction between men and women. Jingwon didn't know many of them. Thinking about it, after entering the capital, she spent more time with people outside and made more friends. Then, she gradually understood the reason. It was nothing more than a matter of status. Although her status was low compared to Sun Yijia and the others, her status was still much higher than these people. Even if her father's official position was about the same, she still had a grandfather who was a first-rank official. Furthermore, she was doted on by her grandmother. These were all things that raised her status. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was the most honorable girl in the Luo Shangshu. Usually, there would be people coming to the Luo family from time to time, but there were very few people who were worthy of being received by old Madame Luo personally. Madame Wang was more than enough to receive them. It was good enough to have the opportunity to meet old Madame Luo and greet her. After Jingwan entered the capital, she basically didn't have any free time. Therefore, old Madame Luo basically didn't let Jingwan come out to entertain these girls. Jingwan's reputation in the capital was now well known. It could be said that she was as famous as Sun Yijia and Ruan Fengfei, or even better than the two of them. However, her limelight was temporary. If she didn't do anything eye-catching for a long time, she would probably gradually be forgotten. Unlike the two of them, who relied on their own talents to accumulate over the years. The above was enough. It was enough for these girls to curry favor with her. Most of the girls actually didn't have any bad intentions. At most, they just wanted to use their friendship to increase their own value. This was very normal. As long as they didn't do it too deliberately, act too lowly, or have bad intentions, Jingwan could talk to them calmly. If she could meet someone who was compatible with her, she didn't mind having another little sister. Of course, after a round, Jingwan felt that she was thinking too much. After all, they were different from her. At least in terms of thinking, they couldn't be open and had a strong sense of hierarchy. When they talked to her, they always had a purpose and were very careful. Even if she didn't dislike them for being childish, there was no possibility of them becoming friends. Along with the faint sound of gongs and drums, the crowd began to boil. She's here, she's here. Everyone knew that the person they were waiting for had finally appeared. The older brothers of the Luo family were all there. Although it wasn't the first time they had seen such a scene, when the younger sisters went out, they were duty-bound to escort them. Because the girls were too excited, they all squeezed towards the window. Jingwan frowned slightly. It was better for her to step back a little. But because she was close to the window from the beginning, it wasn't easy for her to step back now. A hand reached out from the side, grabbed her arm, and pulled her in that direction. Jingwan raised her head. Seeing that it was her brother, she smiled and walked over with his strength. Because he was a man, the other girls who looked at him blushing and refused to look away subconsciously avoided him. Then, Jingwan smoothly occupied the best position on the man's side. Seeing Luo Jinghua do this, the other girls of the Luo family were also brought over one by one. They did it naturally and felt guilty for not doing anything. If you're a man, step back, Luo Jinghua said with a bit of a smile. Jinghua, you can't be like this. You can't disregard your brotherhood just to please your younger sister. That's right, that's right. The others also joined in, but they didn't have any ill intentions. Luo Jinghua lifted the corner of his mouth. The people parading the streets are all men. It's fine to let the girls see something new. What, do you want to throw down some sachets, handkerchiefs, or something like that? As soon as he said this, many people had goosebumps. Even if they wanted to join in the fun, they didn't dare to look. They all cursed Luo Jinghua. Speaking of which, Luo Jinghua didn't have to be polite to these brothers who often hung out with each other. Laughing and scolding were common occurrences. One had to know that currently, even when facing his grandfather, Luo Peishan, he wasn't as angry as when facing his younger sister. Wherever his younger sister was, he had to protect and take good care of her. Everything else just stood aside. Jingwan covered her mouth and laughed. Her brother's character was really good. He was open-minded and didn't care about trifles. He was straightforward and didn't have many sneaky thoughts. After being with him for a long time, one would probably feel happy. However, one shouldn't think that he was especially naive and ignorant of worldly affairs. In fact, with his grandfather, Luo Peishan, teaching him from time to time, none of the brothers of the Luo family were good people when it came to serious matters. The group of young masters were all pushed to the back, so the girls in front didn't have to squeeze too much. Look, they're coming, a young girl at the side shouted excitedly. And Jingwan also saw them. They were tall horses with big red flowers tied together with red silk on their chests. The top scorer in the middle looked to be in his 30s. His facial features were very regular and square. It was said that one's appearance was born from one's heart. It wasn't completely unreasonable. This person gave others the feeling that he was at least an upright gentleman. On the top scorer, he looked to be in his 30s. Moreover, Jingwon could faintly see the shadow of Elder Jiang on him. Was he from the Jiang family? Needless to say, the top scorer on the right had a handkerchief, a sachet, and even some flowers that never stopped. Jingwon wasn't surprised that Chen Jingmin could appear. The people of the Luo family weren't surprised either. Third Miss Luo, you must have specially come to see the top scorer. A young girl at the side pretended to tease and said. When these words were said, the people of the Luo family were stunned. Even the younger siblings who were in their early teens couldn't help but look at Jingwon's expression. They might have been hidden from the adults about Li Ruyu causing trouble at their door, but they basically knew that their third sister had broken off the engagement. Perhaps they didn't know what this meant, but they knew that it wasn't a good thing. Jingwon was also very helpless about this. She clearly didn't care, but some people felt that she was very sad. Now that her ex-fiancé had become the top scorer and was favored by the ladies, she was probably even sadder. Jingwon smiled faintly. Before the court examination results are out, who knows who the top 3 will be? I'm just like everyone else. I'm just here for the fun. Looking at the 3 people who were getting closer and closer, the smile on Jingwon's face suddenly widened. Those who didn't know would think that she was proud of the person who came in third, but those who knew were a little confused. Third sister, what are you smiling about? Luo Qi asked curiously. And third sister feels that the 3 of them must be in a state of ice and fire. What do you mean? There are so many things falling on their bodies. It must be very painful, but they can't avoid it. They must be really happy. Is this considered a state of ice and fire? If third sister didn't mention it, I wouldn't have noticed. There are so many things falling on their bodies. If there are beads in the sachets and they don't pay attention, they might be bruised after the parade. Once these words were spoken, everyone looked at each other in dismay. In that case, this parade was actually a very torturous thing to do. Jingwon turned around and asked her brothers, are there any students who have failed the exam out of jealousy and vengeance, who purposely took advantage of this time to put stones in their sachets? She asked her brothers curiously. I don't think so, Luo Jingda said uncertainly. But you can't rule out this possibility. Who knows? Because of the special occasion, those people will definitely be careful and only throw stones on their bodies. Little sister, I told you that you can only bear with it. So, Luo Jingda touched his chin. If you have the chance, ask Jingmin. At this moment, there were screams coming from below. It seemed that Xie Yuan's nose was bleeding. Could it be? Jingwon covered her mouth with a brocade handkerchief. Did she have the potential to jinx it? The parade stopped, and it seemed that Xie Yuan was seriously injured. Several brothers of the Luo family came forward, and some girls spontaneously stepped back. Luo Jingda looked outside carefully. It seems that someone is deliberately making trouble. Jingwon also noticed that it was not only Xie Yuan who was injured. If Jingwon was right, Chen Jingmin should have been hit the most. It was just that he was not unlucky enough to be hit on his face. He seemed to be holding something in his hand. Although there was no expression on his face, the veins on the back of his hand were almost popping out. It seemed that he was really angry, or maybe he was really in pain. Chen Jingmin was 16 years old. There were many people in their 40s and 50s in the spring examination. There were even some in their 50s and 60s. They had worked hard for many years but still failed. Seeing them in high spirits and Chen Jingmin's success at such a young age, it was inevitable that he would feel unbalanced. The rational ones might just feel jealous in their hearts and leave sadly. But in a moment of anger, it was normal to do something impulsive. Xie Yuan's nose was simply treated. His nostrils were stuffed, and the parade continued. However, things obviously didn't end there. Some of the city guards rushed into the crowd and mercilessly pressed a few people to the ground and quickly dragged them away. No, they are not from the city defense team, Luo Jingda said. They are from the blackguard. The man on the horse in front of them is Zhuqiansher of the blackguard, Luo Jingda said. Jingwon heard this and looked over. The leader of the parade was a young man in his early 20s. His face was a little sharp, and there was a faint evil spirit. Jingwon was not sure if the blackguard was the same as the genie guards in the history of the previous world. If it was, then this group of people was really not to be trifled with. It seems that this situation has been expected. Otherwise, the blackguard would not have been dispatched. Luo Jingbo said again. I also know this Zhuang Yuan. He is from the Xie family. As for the second place, he is from the Jiang family. It seems that only Zheng Min can be considered as a person from a humble family. Sure enough, in this aspect, the gentry has the advantage. Luo Jingde continued. Zhuang Yuan is representing the Xie family. If he continues to parade with this dignity, then the Xie family will be laughed at for a period of time. Luo Jingming, the second young master of the Luo family, continued his cousin's words. Today's event can be considered to be extremely lively. As the parade went away, the people who had already seen it were satisfied. They did not continue to swarm forward. Instead, they left in groups of 2s and 3s. Some of the young ladies of the common family were laughing and joking with each other. 99% of the people were purely there to watch the fun. The real common people at the bottom did not have any feelings of jealousy. They were born at the foot of the imperial city and grew up at the foot of the imperial city. It was enough for them to be safe and happy. As the crowd gradually dispersed, the street was quickly cleaned up. People continued to do what they were supposed to do. There was no trace of the previous bustle. Seeing that it was about time, the young men of the noble families in each building walked out of the private rooms one after another. Perhaps they wanted to take the opportunity to walk around, or perhaps they wanted to go home directly. Jingwan and the others had just walked out of the private room when they saw the person coming out of the private room next door. It was a more unexpected person. It was Wan Fengfei, the youngest daughter of the Prime Minister of the Cabinet. She was still so gentle and elegant. Those who followed her were probably her nephews and nieces. Perhaps the youngest one was her grandnephew? After all, Wan Ruizhong was much older than Luo Peishan. Luo Peishan's great-grandchild was already in his mother's belly. It was not strange for Wan Daren to have a great-grandchild. Jingwan was a bit embarrassed. The Prime Minister, who looked amiable and would snatch this treasure of the heart like other people, was also a typical example of an old cow nibbling on young grass. However, no one felt that there was a problem. They were used to it. If Wan Daren still made one of his concubines pregnant at this time, others would only say that he was old but vigorous, making people envious. Therefore, one really could not use the standards of her previous life to measure the men here. Otherwise, one would feel stifled all the time. Thinking about her previous life, there was no lack of 60 or 70-year-old men nibbling on underage young ladies. In fact, the root of men's inferiority was the same everywhere. Those in her previous life were mostly restrained. The etiquette and rules of inferior first, then superior were the same everywhere. After Jingwan and the others greeted them, Wan Fengfei and the others also followed suit and greeted them. However, there were a few people who looked arrogant with their noses up, seemingly disdaining to pay attention to them. Jingwan did not pay attention to these people. Although Wan Ruizhong was the Prime Minister of the Cabinet, his age was there. How many more years could he sit in that position? As an official of the same court, father, son, grandfather, and grandson could not all be third-grade officials. And within the same clan, there could not be more than 3 third-grade officials. Could the Wan family immediately have someone enter the 3rd grade after Grand Elder Wan retired? If it was possible, it was only one person. As for the others, when their uncles were promoted, compared to when their grandfather was still in the position, it was a completely different matter. Under the same roof, they would become 2 families. Naturally, their value would plummet. Wan Fengfei was the same. If Grand Elder Wan suddenly retired or disappeared, would she still be the moon surrounded by stars? Jingwan felt that Wan Fengfei's eyes were always on her. Although there was a slight smile on her face, her eyes made people uncomfortable. The key was that the others did not seem to feel it. On the day of Great Elder Princess's birthday, the flower that my father brought back died the next day for some reason. My father was very distressed. Miss Luo, do you know the reason? Wan Fengfei suddenly said. What other reason can it be? The lowly thing can't adapt to our mansion. A person behind Wan Fengfei immediately made an excuse disdainfully. Xiao, what nonsense are you talking about? Shut up. The beauty's face darkened, but still had a different beauty. The young man immediately shut up and begged Wan Fengfei for mercy with a smile. Jingwan knew very well that even if she ignored the flower, it could live for 10 days to half a month. It was impossible for it to die in one night. There was only one reason, it was man-made. However, in the Ruan family, who dared to touch Lord Ruan's things? Jingwan thought of Ruan Fengfei's previous guess. Was she really that kind of person? Ruan Fengfei noticed that the way Jingwan looked at her changed slightly. Did she feel something? That was more interesting. She would definitely be more interesting than those people who died, without knowing anything. She was gentle, kind, open-minded, and steady. In her father's words, she was a phoenix among men, far better than herself. She just didn't know that such a person would one day lose her reputation. Oh, right, it was a scandal that she had done herself. She didn't know if those people who praised her would be heartbroken because of her misjudgment. That scene must be very good. The smile on the corner of her mouth became more obvious. Ruan Fengfei had never thought that she was that kind of person in essence. She didn't need others to frame her. When her ugliness was exposed in front of people, it really made many people want to dig their own eyes out. Jingwan's heart skipped a beat. Did she meet a pervert? Or a pervert who inexplicably targeted her? However, Jingwan immediately straightened her attitude. In her previous life, she had encountered a lot of things in the last few years. She had met many different kinds of people. If she really met one, she would just deal with their moves as they came. Who was afraid of who? The others probably didn't notice the back and forth between Jingwan and Ruan Fengfei. Towards the Ruan family's words, there were naturally people who were angry, especially Luo Jinghua, who had a sister complex now. A lowly thing that was also brought back by the Grand Secretary. A lowly thing that was fancied by your grandfather. What do you mean by this? Are you questioning your grandfather? Or is it that in your eyes, your grandfather is also a lowly thing? That youth's face flushed red in anger. Xiao Wu, I told you to shut up. Sorry, Miss Luo, young Master Luo. My nephew is not sensible. We definitely didn't mean that. We simply wanted to ask Miss Luo if you know the reason. Ruan Fengfei apologized very sincerely. The Luo family's faces relaxed. Miss Ruan, you don't need to apologize. It's just a small matter. It's not to the extent that the elders should apologize for the juniors. Jingwan didn't care about the other side's change of expression. As for the death of one knight, the biggest possibility is that the root was injured. Maybe it was a child's mischief, or maybe someone accidentally spilled hot water on it. Ruan Fengfei seemed to be enlightened, or it's because the servants didn't take it seriously. This idea was really vicious. Now, Jingwan was at least 70% sure that it was done by Ruan Fengfei. Naturally, there were not only these two families here. Other families appeared one after another. Even those who had a higher status than Jingwan took the initiative to greet her. It could be seen that what happened in Great Elder Princess's mansion had a great impact. Ruan Fengfei received the same enthusiasm as before, but she was unhappy in her heart. They parted ways and went their separate ways. Jingwan saw that her sisters seemed to be very interested in the outside world. In fact, she was also a little interested. After all, she hadn't had a good time since she came to the capital. However, today was indeed not the right time. Luo Jinghua got married only 3 days ago, and the family was still busy. It was not easy for them to come out and join in the fun today. After a few days, I'll take you out for a walk. Jingwan was a little rich woman among the sisters of the Luo family. As for how much money she had, no one knew, but it was definitely not a small amount. If they went out with her, they would naturally get some benefits. Luo Qi knew this best, so she nodded vigorously. After returning to the Luo family, they went back to their own courtyards and went to the begonia house. Miss, I think there is something wrong with Miss Ruan. You'd better stay away from her in the future. Not only did Li Hongyuan tell Nanny Gong, but Nanny Gong also noticed the clue. Before leaving the capital, Nanny Gong was also Li Hongyuan's secret guard, but these secret guards had their own things. Nanny Gong might have been prepared by Li Hongyuan for Jingwan from the beginning, so she had less time to show up and didn't know much about Wan Fengfei. The Wan Fengfei she knew was also the one the world knew. Li Hongyuan did not deliberately remind her. Before she entered the capital, she had told Jingwan about Wan Fengfei. Most of the things she said about Wan Fengfei were positive. After being in close contact with her, even if she still knew nothing about the real Wan Fengfei, she would probably feel something. Nanny, don't worry. I won't have any contact with her under normal circumstances. If I really meet her, I'll be careful. Nanny Gong looked at Jingwan and asked, Miss, you've noticed it. How can I not notice when I'm being targeted? Nanny Gong raised her eyebrows. So, Wan Fengfei deliberately showed her tail in front of Miss and let her notice it at the same time? That was right. If not, Wan Fengfei would be the first to be noticed by her father. There will be a Qianglin banquet tonight. Probably tomorrow, the matter between Li Ruyu and cousin Min will be solved. In fact, Le Qingdi was anxious. Before tomorrow, before lunchtime, Jingwan received a message from Madame Luo that she would be taken to the palace in the afternoon. She didn't say anything more. Jingwan was speechless. Grandma really trusted her so much. Was she sure that she wouldn't be timid? And didn't she have any taboos about what she was wearing? Well, Nanny Gong used to be an aunt in charge in the palace. Although she had little power, she still remembered the rules and etiquette clearly. Did Jingwan have stage fright? Of course not. In her previous life, she was taken by her scumbag father to see the world when she was only the size of a palm. As she grew up, that scumbag climbed higher and higher, and the people she met were naturally of higher status. It would be strange if she had stage fright when she was used to it. After lunch, Jingwan dressed up and went to the main courtyard. Then, for the first time, she saw Madame Luo in the dress of a first-rank madam. She felt a little different from the usual Madame Luo. Even though she still had the same expression, she still made people feel that she was much more dignified. Madame Luo looked at Jingwan from head to toe and nodded with satisfaction. Nanny Gong is very attentive. Madame Luo, you flatter me.
It's my job.
Because her skills were not as good as other places, Jingwan only brought Nanny Gong with her, and Madame Luo only brought a steady maid. It was Jingwan's first time coming to a place like the palace. It was not much different from the ancient ruins she saw in her previous life. There were carved railings and painted buildings, and it was magnificent. However, those in her previous life were probably just for people to visit, and it lacked the aura of people who lived there for a long time. The biggest characteristic of the palace was probably its strict rules and tight security. They got off the carriage outside the palace gate, and then they had to walk step by step to show respect to the royal family. However, the palace was such a big place. It was okay for young people, but if they were older, it would be a bit difficult to walk all the way to the harem. Fortunately, it was already spring, and there was no coldness of winter, nor the heat of summer. Otherwise, it would be even more annoying. The royal family only cared about their dignity and did not care about human feelings. It was really unlikable. Jingwan was in good health, so there was no problem for her to walk faster or slower. However, Madame Luo could not. At first, she could barely maintain her speed, but later, she became slower and slower. In these years, Jingwan spent a lot of effort to take care of Madame Luo's health. She could not ignore Madame Luo's health just to not let those so-called nobles wait for a long time. Therefore, when Madame Luo wanted to speed up, she deliberately slowed down. Wan, Madame Luo did not know what to do with Jingwan's temper. When it came to her health, her granddaughter was like a stubborn donkey. No matter what anyone said, it was useless. Her slow speed was comparable to taking a stroll after a meal to aid digestion. It was very leisurely. The eunuch leading the way could not help but urge, "Hurry up, nobles." Jingwan pulled a long face. "Don't you see that my grandmother is old and can't walk fast? What if she gets tired? Can you bear the responsibility? Or are you saying that after becoming a eunuch, you have forgotten your ancestors and don't know filial piety? Even if you don't know, the words of respect for the elderly set by the founding ancestor are just empty words? Nobles, and so on, what can they do? If they can't wait, they should prepare the sedan earlier. Could it be that their own mother and grandmother also rely on a pair of legs to enter the palace and have to be in a hurry? The more Jingwan said, the angrier she became. What was this all about? The eunuch's face suddenly darkened. Jingwan's words were not malicious. She even accused her of despising the founding ancestor. You, Wan. Madame Luo was also anxious. These words were really disgraceful. How could she lose her sense of propriety at this time? What? Despising nobles? Disrespecting the royal family? Is 20 strokes enough? If not, add 20 more. Did Jingwan not have a temper? Sorry, when her temper was up, even 9 oxen could not pull her back. Although there were only a few people nearby, further away, there were palace servants coming and going, as well as palace guards. Jingwan did not deliberately lower her voice. Almost everyone heard it. Hiss, whose family's daughter was this? She was too bold. Jingwan's face darkened. The eunuch also knew that he had met a stubborn master. What should he do? Admit defeat? He still had some status in the Kunyi palace. If he admitted defeat this time, wouldn't everyone step on him next time? Moreover, this sedan was not ordered by the higher-ups. Who would dare to use it casually? Madame Luo saw Jingwan's stubbornness and sighed slightly. She did not say anything. In the end, this granddaughter of hers was looking out for her. For a moment, the situation was in a deadlock. What's going on? A man's voice sounded from behind. Jingwan turned around and saw 4 men getting down from the palanquin. This time, she was furious. A group of men with good arms and legs, but they don't know how to walk. They need people to carry them. The 4 lords, the 4 princes, no matter how slow they were, could see that Jingwan was angry now. Li Hongming, who just spoke, was facing Jingwan's anger directly. To be honest, from birth until now, except for Lu Qingdi and noble consort Su, no one had been angry with him. Those who dared to be angry with him would not do so easily. The rest, needless to say, were harmful. Anger flashed in his eyes, but he still smiled good-naturedly. What made 3rd Miss Luo so angry? 3rd Imperial Brother, are you blind or deaf? Li Hongyuan's pleasant voice sounded. However, sorry, Jingwan did not feel it at all. Which palace are you from? Don't you prepare a sedan to welcome Madame Luo into the palace? The eunuch who was glaring at Jingwan earlier suddenly became a soft-footed prawn and knelt on the ground with a plop. Replying to Wang, this servant is from Kunyi Palace. Oh. Someone from the Empress Palace. Although Li Hongyuan just repeated it lightly, everyone knew what he meant. Li Hongming temporarily forgot Jingwan's big disrespect, and Li Hongyi's expression was good. He did not think that his mother would make such a mistake. He took a few steps forward and kicked her. Cheap servant, you really have guts. You dare to accuse the Empress. Tell me, which palace are you from? Prince, please spare me. Please spare me. This servant is really from the Kunyi Palace, really. Big brother, don't be angry. Whether you are from the Empress Palace or not, you will know later. It's more important to quickly ask someone to bring the sedan. Li Hongming turned and bowed to Madame Luo. Madame Luo has been tired. Prince is too polite. This servant is not tired. Li Hongming smiled and looked at Jingwan. 3rd Miss Luo's expression said otherwise. Jingwan was expressionless. This servant is not grandmother. Naturally, I don't know if grandmother has been tired. However, after walking for so long, this servant feels that her feet are sore. Grandmother is old, but strong. Her body is probably better than this servant's, so she doesn't feel tired. After all, the old people are still active now, but young people like us have become soft bones. Walking a few more steps will tire us to death. Li Hongming choked on his sobs. It was fine if that bastard Li Hongyuan scolded him openly and secretly. He could pretend that he didn't hear it. But now that he was being scolded indirectly by a little girl, he had to endure it. It's all because of the palace's incompetence that Miss has been tired. I will definitely punish them and strictly enforce the palace rules. Those people from Kunyi Palace are pretending to be good people. What are they? Jingwan sneered in her heart, but her expression still did not ease. Li Hongyuan snickered inwardly. Wanwan was really becoming more and more likable. That angry appearance was really like an angry kitten. Her little claws scratched and scratched, causing people's hearts to itch. This ability to slander others with her mouth was really taught by this prince. However, one day, he must let her scold whoever she wants. She can point at the other party's nose and scold them until they don't dare to say a word. Moreover, she doesn't need to beat around the bush. The matters in the palace are handled by the Empress and Mufei. Now that there are no courtiers, Third Imperial Brother doesn't need to pretend for anyone. You don't feel tired. Lao Lu. Jingwen seemed to have heard the sound of Rui Qinhuang gritting his teeth. She shot a glance at Jin Qinhuang. Living a life of suffocation and humiliation, going to curry favor with others in exchange for affection, it was better to live a happy and carefree life, acting recklessly and oppressing others. This living king of hell was considered to have done this to the extreme. Unfortunately, not many people had his capital. Just at this time, another person hurried over with 2 small palanquins. Without saying a word, he directly knelt down to beg for forgiveness. Wang Ye, it's this old servant's dereliction of duty. In a moment of carelessness, this old servant has made a mistake. Wang Ye, please punish me. This was the steward of Kunyi Palace and was deeply trusted by the Empress. Li Hongyi naturally would not punish him. Just as he was about to appease him, the living king of hell spoke again. Since it's like this, then hand this matter over to the steward of the inner court to investigate. As a person of the Empress Palace, doing something like neglecting a court official's wife can be resolved with a word of dereliction of duty. You all did not do your job well. Not only did you implicate the Empress' reputation, but you also gained the reputation of being lax in governing. If you all are not removed and replaced, wouldn't it be difficult to establish the Empress' dignity? Li Hongyuan, you. Li Hongyi's gaze was as if he wanted to eat Li Hongyuan alive. What, does eldest imperial brother have an opinion about Ben Wang? Or is it that Ben Wang said something wrong? Jingwen slightly raised her eyebrows. Should she say that he was indeed the living king of hell? Grabbing a handle, he directly stepped on it to death. Ask Prince Rui, did he dare to say this? Did he dare to so brazenly offend the Empress? Even Le Qing Emperor had to give the Empress some face many times. Even if the people of the Empress Palace were in the wrong, it was also handed over to the Empress to deal with. The steward of Kunyi Palace directly collapsed to the ground. He had a grudge with the steward of the inner court. This time, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. He regretted it. He shouldn't have allowed his subordinates to plot against each other just because he received benefits. Originally, this kind of thing had happened before, but as a woman with a title, in the end, she could only grit her teeth and persevere. She apologized, and the other side naturally wouldn't shout for her master to come forward. This kind of thing didn't only happen in Kunyi Palace. However, today he met Jingwen, this kind of person who didn't care about anything and made a scene because she loved her grandmother. He also ran into the hands of the living king of hell, so he completely fell. Prince Kong was angry, Prince Rui was happy, and Prince Gong pretended to be mute from beginning to end. He probably thought that Li Hongyuan was helping imperial concubine Su. In fact, if you make Ben Wang's wife unhappy, you can go die. This was the real reason. Halfway through, they parted ways. Several princes went to see Le Qing Emperor. Jingwen and old Madame Luo's group went directly to Kunyi Palace. It could be assumed that this matter had already been known by many people. There were a lot of people in Kunyi Palace. Not to mention the main imperial concubines, there were also many imperial concubines and even a white-haired old prince who was said to be a character of Le Qing Emperor's grandfather's generation. The Empress was also a person who could put down her status. After Jingwen and old Madame Luo bowed, she directly apologized to old Madame Luo. As for the matter of her being replaced, she didn't even frown and didn't mention a word. You're the Luo family's third miss? You're really a beautiful girl. The Empress smiled gently. In the depths of her eyes, there was an unknown shock. It could be said that she had been raised to be an empress since she was young, but this little girl had the self-restraint that she had after being an empress for several years. Most importantly, this was not something that was cultivated, but something that was naturally brought out from her bones. Isn't that so? This empress also likes you very much. Imperial concubine Su said with a smile. The corners of her eyes were completely open. She was naturally charming, but there was also a trace of heroism, causing her entire aura to be fully released. She was not inferior to the empress. So, what if the nobles wait? Did you say that? The originally peaceful atmosphere was broken by a sentence. Jingwan looked in the direction of the voice. Huh. This was the first time she saw such a naturally resentful face. The corners of her eyes were drooping, and the corners of her mouth were drooping. There were crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, and her eyes were cloudy, but she still looked like she had just cried. How could this kind of appearance enter the imperial family? Yes, this subject said so. You're quite bold. All right, the little girl was just angry and didn't choose her words carefully. Besides, we have nothing to do. We haven't dealt with the emperor yet, and Princess Consort Chung and her daughter haven't entered the palace yet. So what if we wait? We're already so old. Why are we still arguing with a little girl? The white-haired old prince spoke. Many of his teeth had fallen out, so his speech was uneven, but he spoke slowly, showing his excellent manners. The dignity of the royal family cannot be undermined. I said, that's enough. The old prince glanced at the old princess consort, telling her to shut up. The other sisters-in-law of the same generation, and the younger niece-in-law, all curled their lips in disdain. She always talked about the dignity of the royal family, but the only one who could truly represent the dignity of the royal family was the emperor. His son and the empress had some status, but the others who were gradually drifting away from him were not the same. If she wasn't Emperor Li's elder, how could she have the right to sit here?
Dream on.
It was mainly because Li Ruyu's scandal this time was too embarrassing. Now that they knew, they could not ask. In fact, they just needed to listen. They didn't have the right to interrupt. Then, Princess Consort Chung and Li Ruyu arrived. Jingwan glanced at Li Ruyu. She didn't look too good, and her clothes weren't the usual flamboyant red. Was she pretending to be pitiful? When she met Jingwan's eyes, she instinctively wanted to curse. Little. Fortunately, she realized where she was and swallowed it back. It seemed that it was easy to change mountains and rivers, but hard to change a person's nature. A beating was too light. However, after that, Li Ruyu was exceptionally well-behaved. She had no choice but to be well-behaved. Everyone's gazes landed on her. They were like knives that wanted to slice her alive. A young lady like Li Ruyu couldn't take it. She couldn't stop trembling. His Majesty has arrived. Li Ruyu was immediately thrown aside, and everyone stood up to welcome him. Emperor Li strode in, followed by the 4 people Jingwan had met before, and 2 older princes, Prince Chung, Luo Peishan, and Qin Jingmin. Chen Jingmin, who was walking at the back, saw Jingwan at first glance. He secretly clenched his fists, then relaxed them, looked away, and lowered his eyes. After Emperor Li sat down on the main seat, everyone knelt down to greet him. Emperor Li hurriedly asked them to get up. He first asked the granduncle, who was a little inconvenient to move, about the food, clothes, and whether the servants served him well. Jingwan could feel that Li Qingdi was genuinely concerned about his elders and was not acting. After a while, Emperor Li's eyes fell on Jingwan. After looking at her for a while, he suddenly laughed. I didn't know that you little girl are so bold and have a bad temper. You also know that you will be beaten if you don't respect the imperial family. Tell me, should I beat you or not? Whether you beat me or not, it all depends on your majesty. You are the boss. Everything is up to you. I asked you, but you threw it back to me. But since you dare to say that 20 is not enough, I think you are not afraid of being beaten. Your Majesty, not being afraid is one thing, not thinking is another. This subject's daughter is not afraid of being beaten, but I don't want to be beaten. Little girl, you are quite cunning. For the sake of you finding me a few talents, I won't beat you. Thank you, Your Majesty. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. I am also doing it for the sake of your filial piety. I heard from your grandfather that when you were in Chide and Manor, you personally took care of your grandmother. It is really commendable that you can do this at such a young age. Grandmother dotes on me and protects me. She treats this subject's daughter like a pearl and a treasure. Then, this subject's daughter should take care of grandmother. According to what you said, if your grandmother didn't treat you well, would you not be filial to her? Your Majesty, if this subject's daughter said that this subject's daughter is still filial to her wholeheartedly even though grandmother trampled this subject's daughter like mud, would you believe it? This subject's daughter has always believed that the feelings between people are mutual. If only one party gives and the other party is indifferent, or even ignores it, then sooner or later, one's heart will be cold. This subject's daughter does not think that she is a foolish filial person. Perhaps I will still do my part, but that is from the perspective of an outsider. For example, if grandmother is ill and I don't take care of her by her bed, but hide far away and copy Buddhist scriptures, saying that I am praying for grandmother's well-being, who can say that I am not? If I don't ask her what medicine she takes or what diet she eats, and only ask a few perfunctory questions when paying respects to her, won't others be able to blame me? Lu Qingdi narrowed his eyes and stared at Jingwan for a long time. Jingwan herself didn't feel anything, but the people around her broke out in a cold sweat for her. What she said was really against filial piety, but as she said, who could say that she was wrong? Lu Qingdi suddenly smiled. Girl, you really dare to say that? This subject's daughter knows that these are all facts. There is nothing that I dare not say. That's not right. There are some facts that few people dare to say. When Lu Qingdi said this, both his tone and expression were a little cold. Some people present had cold sweat on their backs. What Jingwan said was exactly what they did. That's for an outsider to see. That was the worst part. However, as the emperor, it was a serious crime for his son to pry into his illness. So these were all bullshit. Whether or not they had the heart, was not only reflected in this point. Lu Qingdi recovered his smile in an instant. Little girl, go sit in the side hall first. Or go outside for a walk. After I deal with this matter, you can come back and chat with me. Yes, Your Majesty. Jingwan bowed to the others one by one and smiled at Madame Luo before leaving. Madame Luo, I heard a lot about that little girl from Minister Luo. How about you tell me about your affairs in Chide Mansion? If Your Majesty doesn't find those trivial matters annoying, this subject's wife will tell you everything. Madame Luo knew what Lu Qingdi wanted to hear. Our family's third daughter is a good child who has been doted on since she was young. She said that the feelings are mutual, which is true. This subject's wife was seriously ill in the early years, and it was very repetitive. Wang didn't do anything else but accompany me all day. I told her to stay away so that she wouldn't pass the illness, but she always smiled and said that she wasn't afraid. If you were really angry and drove her away, she would come back in less than 2 hours. She would tell you in a soft voice what she had done in the past 2 hours, what she had seen, where a beautiful flower had bloomed, where a bird had fallen from a tree, or what story she had heard from the teacher. She would tell you everything in great detail. For a person who was sick and couldn't leave the house, there was nothing more comforting than hearing these things. When you were really tired, she would be quiet again. I don't know if that girl knows something, but I don't know how many times I could see her when I opened my eyes. Whether she was reading or writing, she would always find out what I needed before the servant girls. Before you could open your mouth, she would sweetly call you grandmother. That soft and gentle voice could instantly calm the panic in my heart. Madame Luo was immersed in the meeting. As she spoke, she couldn't help but wipe her tears. In the early years, I had many grandchildren by my side, but none of them were like this girl. Even if they learned from Wan, they were absent-minded. It was annoying to look at them. And every time the doctor came for an examination, Wan would be more anxious than anyone else. She would ask the doctor many questions repeatedly. Sometimes, the doctor would be impatient, but she would still keep a straight face and chase after the doctor, making the doctor afraid of her. Speaking of this, Madame Luo couldn't help but laugh. If this happened again, the doctor would tell her in detail. Wanwan always remembers what should be done, what shouldn't be done, what can be eaten, and what can't be eaten. She knows better than anyone else. I always told her that these things were left to the servant girls, and she didn't need to do it. But she said that she would only do what she could do. Moreover, how could a servant compare to a relative? That's right, how could a servant compare to a relative? This subject believes that this subject's health improved because Wanwan played a far greater role than those medicines. As Wanwan slowly grew up, this subject could also walk outside. She would follow by your side and gently hold your hand. It was said that sick people were easily capricious. Sometimes, after walking for 2 steps, they would feel tired and not want to walk anymore. The doctor said that this subject's wife needed to walk more. She was like coaxing a child, incomparably patient and patient. In fact, she was the child that needed to be coaxed. Seeing her like this, who could bear to refuse? How could they not care for her in the depths of their hearts? Moreover, Momon had been smart since she was young. She could always think of some strange, but especially useful things. This subject's wife couldn't leave the house for a long time, so she thought of a way. She had the carpenter add wheels to the chair and nail a pedal that could be placed on it. She used this method to bring this subject out. She was also worried that the roads would be uneven and bumpy, so she had people lay down bluestone slabs in and out of the residence. It could be said that she had put in a lot of effort. 3 years ago, this subject's wife, other than fourth uncle's family, was only Wanwan. In fact, the people in the capital didn't know that this subject's wife fell seriously ill again. This subject's illness came with a vengeance. This subject almost died. 3 days. This subject's wife was unconscious for 3 days. Wanwan also didn't sleep for 3 days. She probably didn't know that this subject's wife was conscious. The first time she found out, she was so angry that she didn't even recognize her family. She poured a torrent of abuse on her fourth uncle's family because they said that this subject's wife couldn't take it anymore. At that time, she couldn't swallow the medicine anymore, so she thought of ways to force it down. From the beginning to the end, she held this subject's wife's hand tightly and talked nonstop. This subject's wife could feel her tears falling on my hand, but you couldn't hear her cries. This subject's wife thought, my good granddaughter is still so young, and her mother is so unreliable. If this subject's wife left like this, she would have no one to love her, no one to take care of her, and wouldn't she have to shoulder everything on her own? How could I just leave her like this? This subject's wife had to watch her grow up, watch her get married, watch her have children, watch her live a happy life. Unfortunately, Wanwan's marriage didn't go well. Old Madame Luo's gaze fell on Chen Jingmin. Everyone also looked at Chen Jingmin. His head was buried so low that his expression couldn't be seen. However, everyone could feel that he was suppressing himself. He was trying his best to endure. If it wasn't for Wanwan, this subject's wife's grave would have grown grass long ago. This isn't just a saying. Therefore, Your Majesty, please don't blame Wanwan for being disrespectful to the imperial family. She didn't do it on purpose. The main thing is that this subject's health is involved. She's like a cat whose tail has been stepped on. Old madam, you're thinking too much. I originally didn't blame her, but after hearing your words, I'm even more likely to blame her. Then now, Ryu, tell me, what exactly is going on with you scheming against Chen Jingmin? I don't want to listen to your sophistry. I just want to know what the truth is. I didn't wait for a few days in vain. I've already investigated everything that needs to be investigated. Now, I'll listen to what you have to say. As a princess of the imperial family, you did such a shameless thing and brought shame to the imperial family. If you still dare to lie, you'll be punished even more. Chapter 110. While waiting for Li Ryu to speak, the two of them were probably not the only ones with complicated feelings. As for Luo Peishan, he really didn't know that his old wife almost died 3 years ago. He had always known that he owed his old wife a lot. Fortunately, he had an obedient and delicate granddaughter, like third girl, to accompany her and take care of her. Otherwise, he would have to treat his granddaughter better in the future. It wasn't just because of his old wife. As the girls said, feelings were mutual. Moreover, this girl was someone who would treat you well 10 times better if you treated her well. Wasn't Jingwa's matter the best proof? He also wanted to experience the feeling of being treated wholeheartedly by his granddaughter. Now that he thought about it, why didn't he get along well with his granddaughter at that time, because of his parents' death? Why didn't he think of taking more time to accompany his sick wife? However, it was strange. According to his old wife, third girl was always by her side. Why was it that the number of times he saw her could be counted on one hand? It shouldn't be. Li Honyuan fell into silence. Before Wanwan came to the capital, although he had been paying attention to her for the next few years, the hidden guards had only sent back a few words. How could he have the feelings of the person involved? He thought that he was a cold-hearted person who had seen through everything in his previous life. He even suspected that if Wanwan hadn't died in his previous life and he could have gotten what he wanted in the end, then when he had another chance in life, he might still want to marry Wanwan, but he shouldn't have such a deep obsession. But in reality, after listening to old Madame Luo's words, he felt that his obsession would only be deeper. It was said that he was the final winner in his previous life, but the victory was too tragic. He had to spend several years to rectify the situation and stabilize the country. His body couldn't take it anymore. If Wanwan was by his side, she would definitely be by his side at all times, taking care of him carefully and never leaving him. She has been taking care of your sickly body for 10 years. When you have a healthy body, will you abandon her? No, he would only hold her tighter in the palm of his hand, occupying all of her care and attention, stingily sharing it with others. Wanwan had touched him beyond his imagination. If he couldn't get what he wanted in this life, he would probably go crazy. Moreover, he had always thought that imperial concubine Su treated him wholeheartedly, except for one or two things. But obviously, that was not the case. She was truly wholeheartedly devoted to him and would definitely not mix in anything bad. The other people present, especially those old princes and princesses, used to think that their children were very filial and showed off outside from time to time. Fortunately, they didn't meet someone like Madame Luo. Otherwise, wouldn't they be waiting to be slapped in the face? It was said that without comparison, there was no way to distinguish between good and bad. Compared to Madame Luo's words, she even began to suspect that those juniors were acting. There was a saying that touched his heart the most. How could servants compare to family? Thinking back, how correct it was. If you were surrounded by servants who were meticulous and considerate, you would probably feel annoyed and rarely smile. However, if your family was by your side, even if it was just a casual chat, you would feel happy. As expected, none of those filial sons and grandsons were truly attentive. Otherwise, how could they not know what the elderly really needed? After the suspicion, they were a little angry. After the anger, they began to envy. Why didn't they meet such a good grandchild? This Luo Chunshur was too lucky. Therefore, this group of living ancestors began to nitpick after returning. In the past, everything was good, but now everything was not pleasing to the eye. However, these living ancestors still had a temper and refused to say what their children and grandchildren did not do well. In their minds, if the other family's granddaughter could think of it, could it be that they were made of wood and couldn't think of it? This made the children and grandchildren badly battered. Those who were truly filial repeatedly begged for mercy when they were lectured. As for those who were really just putting on an act, they were caught off guard and thought that they had exposed themselves. In a moment of carelessness, they panicked. This time, they really exposed themselves. Well, they didn't get the treatment they wanted for the time being. Instead, they exposed the true and false feelings first. Naturally, they were furious when they found out that they had spoiled an ingrate. Jingwan probably didn't expect that she had inadvertently cheated so many people. At the moment, Li Ruyu stammered for a long time and couldn't say anything. As for Commandery Prince Chung, his heart was like dead ashes after Madame Luo's words. After hearing Emperor Li's words, he was completely numb. Therefore, when Li Ruyu looked at her for help, she didn't respond at all. Ruyu, you don't need to look at your mother. His Majesty is asking you. You just need to tell him everything in detail. the Empress said lightly. She didn't speak harshly, but the women in the harem all knew that she had completely given up on Li Ruyu and didn't intend to help her at all. They thought in their hearts that she was really heartless. However, if they were in her shoes, they would also give up Li Ruyu without hesitation in the current situation. It was a pity that they couldn't use this matter to attack the Empress. However, the Empress had suffered a great loss today. Tears began to fall from Li Ruyu's eyes. In the harem, Lu Qingdi had seen a lot of women cry. They looked pitiful, pear blossoms in the rain, stubborn and aggrieved. Those were his women. When he had the intention, he would coax them. Li Ruyu was nothing. She was just his niece. Originally, he was busy with government affairs and had to solve these trivial matters. Moreover, there was Jingwan in front of him. Now that he saw Li Ruyu like this, he became more and more impatient. Enough. If you don't want to say it, I'll make you unable to say it in the future. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Li Ruyu repeated this sentence as she cried. And it was this sentence that seemed to convince herself. It's all that little bitch Luo Jingwan's fault. If it weren't for her, Brother Lin wouldn't dislike me. She stole the person I like. Why can't I steal her fiancé? The more she said, the more she felt that she was right. In the end, she even shouted loudly. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Madame Luo's face was livid. She only thought that Wenwan had embarrassed her. She didn't expect that it was such a groundless accusation. Wait, Ryu, who is the Brother Lin you mentioned? Is there a fourth person involved in this matter? Your Majesty, Ryu is talking about Yilin. The Empress dispelled Emperor Lu Qingdi's confusion. The Luo family's girl stole Yilin? What kind of nonsense is this? Your Majesty, Princess Ryu is purely slandering. When I first entered the capital, I took my granddaughters to Duke Ding's manor as guests. Because Third Miss has been infatuated with flowers since she was a child. When she was talking about flowers with the young miss in Duke Ding's manor, Sun Bingbai accidentally overheard it. Hearing that Sun Bingbai was also someone who loved flowers and plants very much, he probably said a few words. At that time, Princess Ryu wanted to beat and kill him without the slightest bit of a girl's upbringing. Princess Ryu insulted and hurt people first, so my granddaughter was angry and humiliated her. Because of similar matters, Princess Ryu has laid her hands on quite a few young ladies. Sun Bingbai has long hated her actions to the core. On the spot, he declared that even if he became a monk, he would not take Princess Ryu as his wife. However, Princess Ryu blamed this on my granddaughter. This is simply unreasonable. Madame Luo's sharp gaze stared at Li Ruyu. A girl's reputation was greater than the heavens. How could she let others ruin it? Now that Madame Luo has mentioned it, this prince also remembers. Li Ruyu, this prince seemed to have told you to stay in seclusion for 3 months to learn the rules. Jumping out so early, are you ignoring this prince's words? Li Hongyuan said in a somewhat cold voice. Li Ruyu almost reflexively trembled and shrunk into a ball. TSK, look at you, and you call yourself a princess? Li Hongyuan's tone was very cold and disdainful. Lu Qingdi glanced at his evil son. In fact, he still didn't understand. Why did this evil son come to join in the fun? Shouldn't he be the most impatient with this kind of trivial matter? Shut up. Li Hongyuan looked back at Lu Qingdi indifferently, and then looked away. He gave his father face and didn't speak again. Just because of this, you sacrificed your virginity to scheme against Qin Jingmin? Lu Qingdi felt very speechless. Was there something wrong with his brain? When he looked at Li Ruyu's expression, it really was because of this. At the start, Qingdi Wangfei only thought that her daughter had a grudge against Miss Luo, or that she liked Qin Jingmin. After all, Li Ruyu changed her servant girls frequently. The 2 servant girls on the day of the incident didn't know the reason, and only knew that Li Ruyu was scheming. Now, she just wanted to open Li Ruyu's head and see what she was thinking. Qin Jingmin, what do I want to say? Emperor, can I ask Junju a few questions? Lu Qingdi nodded. Qin Jingmin looked coldly at Li Ruyu. Did you hear Sun Bingbai say that he likes Third Miss Luo? Li Ruyu dumbly shook her head. Have you heard or seen them interact in private? Li Ruyu continued to shake her head. So, just because they both like flowers, you think that Sun Bingbai likes her? Without her, Sun Bingbai will marry you sooner or later. This time, Li Ruyu first nodded and then shook her head. My mother said that I can never marry Lin Gage. Since I can't get what I want, Luo Jingwan, that fickle little bitch, what right does she? Shut up. Chen Jingmin said coldly. Then he suddenly laughed. His laughter was icy. Everyone could feel it. He wanted to reach out and strangle Li Ruyu. But because he still had his reason, he didn't do such a thing. After all, it was a serious crime to murder the imperial family. Chen Jingmin had originally thought that there was someone else who had coveted Biao Mei to scheme against him. The most likely person was Sun Yilin. It seemed that he had thought too much. Junju, I only know today that there is someone as stupid as you in the world. You did such a thing to scheme against me. Why didn't you scheme against Sun Bingbai? If you succeeded, wouldn't you be able to get what you want to marry him? Why did you scheme against me? You broke up Biao Mei and me, and then you might let Sun Bingbai and Biao Mei get together. So, you are so selfless when you admire someone. Even if you have to sacrifice yourself, you want him to find someone he likes? Chen Jingmin felt that it was not easy for him to not make a move now. This time, Li Ruyu was completely stunned. She seemed to have realized that her actions were not only not appeased, but also, how could she be so stupid? And the same question appeared in everyone's mind. Damn, how could this person be so stupid? In fact, when Li Hongyuan was scheming against Chen Jingmin, his final idea was to strip Chen Jingmin and Li Ruyu and throw them together. Then, he would let someone catch them red-handed. However, in order to reduce the trouble in the future, he wanted Li Ruyu to understand Chen Jingmin first. He also needed an excuse to put the blame on Li Ruyu. In the end, this person was too smart. The person he sent changed his mind at the last minute to see if he could induce her to do it herself. Haha, not only did she do it, but she also did it to the extreme. This result was really unexpected. Alright, Li Hongyuan only needed to send someone to see how things went. Princess Qing stared blankly at her dazed daughter. She actually gave birth to this idiot? Could it be that she was swapped after she was born? If she really had the courage to scheme against Sun Yilin, she might even praise her. Then, she would work hard to marry her back to Ding General Manor. But this idiot, Prince Chung, was also in a mess. He wanted to dig a hole and bury himself. Chen Jingmin wiped his face helplessly. Chen Jingmin, Your Majesty, I was tricked by such an idiot. Does it mean that I am also hopelessly stupid? Lu Qingdi wanted to nod, but when he thought of Chen Jingmin's talent and the articles he wrote, there were not many smart people in the world if he was really an idiot. He coughed dryly. As the saying goes, people make mistakes and horses stumble. You probably didn't expect this to happen. It's pardonable that you were careless. But my cousin and I have broken off the engagement. A single mistake could lead to everlasting regret. How could Lu Qingdi not see that this guy was deeply in love with Miss Luo? So now, what do you think? Can I ask Your Majesty to kill Li Ruyu? Can I ask Your Majesty to grant a marriage between my cousin and me? Chen Zhengmin stared at Lu Qingdi. Lu Qingdi was speechless. Did he need to ask? He was not a child. Could he say something more reasonable? Li Hongyuan just thought that he would let bygones be bygones and let him go for the sake of marrying an idiot. But at this time, he still dared to covet his wife. If this could be tolerated, what else could be tolerated? No. Then I will marry her, Chen Zhengmin said with an extremely indifferent expression. But everyone knew that Li Ruyu would not have a good life after marrying him. An enemy who ruined a good marriage, how could you expect him to treat you well? There was no such good thing in his dreams. No, I don't want to marry him. No matter how slow Li Ruyu was, she could feel Chen Jingmin's hatred for her. Even if she was a commandery princess, he had no respect for her. If she married him, she would end up miserable. Isn't it too late to say this now? Lu Qingdi said coldly. Why didn't you think about the consequences when you did such a shameless thing? If you don't want to marry, you can either become a monk or die suddenly. Chen Jingmin doesn't want to marry you. If you die, everything will be over. Li Ruyu immediately shut her mouth. As the saying goes, a bad life is better than a good death. Monks of the imperial family would be expelled from the family, just like ordinary monks. Moreover, there would be a special place to watch over them. Because they were members of the imperial family before they became monks, they were more likely to be abused. This was because the people who watched over them could get pleasure from abusing them, who were of noble status. Was this the end of the matter? No, of course not. As a member of the imperial family, Li Ruyu enjoyed the honor of being a commandery princess, but she did not cultivate her body, did not cultivate her character, did not follow the rules, did not have decorum, and was easily angered. She was irritable and impulsive, and even more shameless. She ruined her chastity, ruined her reputation as a commandery princess, and brought shame to the imperial family. Commandery Prince Cheng. No, your majesty, your majesty. You can't do this. You can't. Oh. What Li Ruyu cared about the most was her commandery princess position. It should be said that all those who were inferior to her, including Sun Yijia and the others, were all bitches. She did not dare to say it out loud only because she could not provoke Sun Yijia and the others. Now that she had become a commandery princess, a bitch in her mouth, how could she bear it? Moreover, to a certain extent, the status of those who were demoted in the imperial family was actually lower. They all had the same mentality. How satisfying it was to trample on those who were once noble. Moreover, Li Ruyu was notorious, so she would only be trampled on more severely in the future. Those who were bullied by her would find ways to bully back. It was not that no one could say no to Li Qingdi, but that person was definitely not Li Ruyu. Therefore, as soon as she opened her mouth, she was directly blocked by the palace servants of Kunyi Palace. Li Qingdi coldly glanced at Li Ruyu, clearly showing her what it meant to have the power of heaven that could not be swept away. He then looked at Commandery Prince Cheng with hostility. Commandery Prince Cheng, you enjoyed the salary of a commandery prince, but did not think about improving your family. You did not teach your adopted daughter well. Today, you are demoted from Commandery Prince Cheng to Duke. I hope that you will teach your children more in the future. If similar things happen again, you will be severely punished. This subject thanks your majesty for your grace. Commandery Prince Cheng knelt on the ground and did not get up for a long time. He was not as stupid as Li Ruyu. At this time, if he obediently accepted the edict, perhaps he could save some face. If he disobeyed the edict, he might be demoted to the bottom. This will end here.
Dismissed.
Li Qingdi stood up and walked to the imperial granduncle. The old prince hurriedly stood up, and Li Qingdi reached out to support him. Thank you, your majesty. Imperial granduncle, you're too kind. I've troubled you to come here today. As a member of the royal family, it's natural that this kind of thing happened to the royal family. However, your majesty has handled it properly, and we old guys don't need to say anything. Even though they were members of the royal family and had a lot of say in some aspects, they also had to know that it was better not to intervene in things that the emperor needed to deal with. If they dared to take advantage of their seniority, they would not have a good end. Originally, this matter should have been handled by the empress, but it was Luo Peishan who brought it up, and he had not been idle these days. If people thought that Commandery Prince Cheng was demoted only because his adopted daughter did not teach him well, they were very wrong. Many people wanted to push Commandery Prince Cheng down. In addition to the fact that Commandery Prince Cheng was not liked, it was also a factional struggle. On the surface, Commandery Prince Cheng was the son-in-law of Ding General Manor, so he naturally belonged to the Empress's faction. Therefore, it was not appropriate for the Empress to deal with this matter, so Li Qingdi made the decision to deal with it personally. Now that the fun was over, the concubines and members of the imperial clan could leave. As for the princes, it was their own business, whether they wanted to find their mothers, deal with official business, or leave the palace to do their own business. As long as it did not affect the business, Li Qingdi did not bother to pay attention to them. Madame Luo wanted to immediately take Jingwan out of the palace, but Li Qingdi said that he wanted to talk to Jingwan. Therefore, Madame Luo stayed in the Kunyi Palace. When Luchengdi stepped out of the gate of the Kunyi Palace, Luchengdi suddenly stopped. Empress, I don't want to see this kind of thing again. Yes, Your Majesty. This kind of thing did not only happen in the Kunyi Palace. With Luchengdi's words, the Empress did not hesitate to rectify it. If others could dismiss her people, as the head of the harem, it was not difficult for her to dismiss people in other palaces. While Madame Luo was changing clothes, Prince Kong wanted to leave at this time, but the Empress stopped him. My son, how about letting third Miss Luo be your step-princess? She is 14 this year and will be of marriageable age next year. At that time, you can remarry. Prince Kong was surprised. He originally wanted to say that the status of Luo's third young lady was a bit low, but on second thought, even if he wanted to marry a noble lady, there is no suitable one now. Besides, it was only a second Wang Fei, so it should be better if her status was lower. Another advantage was that the threat to the legitimate son left behind by the first wife was relatively low. Most importantly, how could he say no to what his Empress mother had decided? It's fine as long as mother decides. The Empress looked at him indifferently. I know what you're thinking. You dislike her status, but she may not like you. Don't think that all the girls in the world will yearn for the royal family. What's more, we are not the only ones who have eyes on this girl. Although her status is low, there are a lot of young masters of equal social status for her to choose. From Chun Jingmin, it can be seen that the Luo family doesn't choose her husband based on social status. Besides, because of what happened in Great Elder Princess's mansion, her social status has doubled. You also saw the situation in the palace examination today. Your father praised her highly, and there are many noble families who want to marry her. It's not easy for her to be your step-princess. Then what should we do now? Mother, please tell me. Before seeing this girl, I actually want Yilin to marry her. After seeing her, maybe she is more suitable to be your princess. Putting aside her family background, this girl is definitely more presentable than your previous consort. Prince Kong did not expect his mother to think so highly of third Miss Luo, but he believed in his mother's judgment. She rarely misjudged. Mother, after seeing her, Lady Su will not give up easily. What's more, Ijia has married into the Luo family. They will naturally want to capture this girl. Lady Su does not have a suitable son, but her maternal family does. Her cousin is the right commander-in-chief, and she has a son who is also very outstanding. Now, we can't do anything, so we will wait and see. After all, the Luo clan's attitude towards this matter is also very important. You have to know that unless your imperial father decrees the marriage, the Luo clan has the possibility of rejecting the marriage. But in fact, your imperial father also knows that this young lady is involved in a lot of things. It's already good that he can sit by and not help either side. While old Madame Luo is still in Kunyi Palace, I will sound her out later. At this time, go to your father's place. If the other brothers are not here, you can go to your own things. If one of them is here, you can stay. Therefore, in order to maximize the benefits for people like them, not to mention the matter of changing relatives, they could even change a few more people. Yes, Mother. Prince Kong was about to leave when he remembered something. Mother, the chief steward in your palace. What, my son? Do you think I only have one available chief steward? This son is overthinking. This son will take his leave. It's only one chief steward. Without one, I can still bring up 8 or 10 more. The Empress was quite indifferent to this point. If one person could really affect the overall situation of her Kunyi Palace, then she could not continue to be the Empress. When noble consort Su brought her 2 sons to Jade Essence Palace, she was also talking to them about Jingwan's marriage. As the Empress guessed, noble consort Su's first choice was her cousin's son. The Empress's first choice was son Yilin. Now, I'm afraid the Empress prefers third Miss Luo to be her daughter-in-law. Therefore, the women in the harem were not much different from each other. Li Hongyuan seemed to be listening casually, but in his heart, a storm was gathering in his eyes. Although he knew that Wanwan would be spied on and schemed against if she broke off the engagement, he couldn't help but be furious when he heard these people betrothing Wanwan to this person, and that person without considering her own thoughts, let alone her happiness. Although these things, whether they considered or not, Wan could only belong to him in the end. However, whether they considered or not affected Li Hongyuan's perception of them. If they considered her when they schemed against Wan, then when he dealt with them, he might be gentler. Yuan, what are you thinking about? Noble consort Su suddenly turned to look at Li Hongyuan as she spoke. I'm bored. I also think that you've been really bored recently. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to the palace today. Li Hongyuan faintly hummed in acknowledgement. When he heard how Wan asked Luo Jinghua to guard against other women, he knew that Wan was very disgusted with those people and those things. He felt that even if he was just putting on a show, he should try his best to reduce the number of people in the courtyard. Although he didn't mind Wan settling accounts with him in the future, those people might delay the time when he won Wan's heart. However, after thinking about it carefully, he realized that since he learned that Wan was going to the capital, he hadn't played 7 Days of Love. It turned out that he didn't need to reflect deeply on himself and subconsciously restrained himself. When did he, Li Hongyuan, become so obedient? Very good. He found another reason for Wan to compensate him. Yuan, how about letting third Miss Luo be your princess consort? Noble consort Su said with a smile. Mother, Li Hongming subconsciously wanted to stop her. This matter couldn't be done like this. Noble consort Su glanced at him, and Li Hongming could only shut his mouth. Li Hongyuan didn't react. Mother, do you want to become enemies with Luo Shongshu? It mainly depends on whether you like it or not, Yuan. Everything else doesn't matter. It's just that this girl's status is still a bit low. If her father sits in the position of a 4th-rank official, then let Luo Shongshu retire early and promote her father. Everything will be fine. Unfortunately, however, she can still be your consort. In front of the throne, this son's everything is not important. The most important thing is to win the support of the courtiers. The implication was that he should shut up and not make such meaningless jokes. He only needed to wait for his father to take the initiative to grant him and Wan's marriage. Before that, he only needed to clear the obstacles for himself and Wan, then clear them. See, it was just a matter of a sentence. How simple. Simple? Damn, there were too many people watching Wan. It would be very tiring to deal with them one by one. It wasn't simple at all. Wan's current situation was much more complicated than in his previous life. At that time, he didn't know the specifics, but at most, the Qin family would break off the engagement in 2 days. Princess Qin Jingmin still had some say, but she was unknown. It was only a month later that she was suddenly schemed against and set up a second fiancé. Then, she got married not long after she became of age, and it was when the man was in mourning. However, she didn't have to wait for another 3 years. Speaking of which, at that time, the Luo family actually wanted her to wait for 3 more years, right? Why did they let her get married at that time? There must be a reason behind it. Unfortunately, Li Hongyuan basically didn't know about Wan at that time and didn't pay attention to her at all. How could he know the reason? Old Madame Luo's words indeed have an impact on Yuan, right? Noble consort Su sighed softly. Li Hongyuan frowned slightly and looked at noble consort Su. Imperial Mother is thinking too much. It's not like I can't feel how Imperial Mother treats me. There's no need for Imperial Mother to use this method to prove anything. Yuan, Imperial Mother first wants the best for you. Everything else can be considered later. Li Hongyuan glanced at Li Hongming. Sacrificing the interests of your own son to fulfill the love of your adopted son. It's no wonder your biological son always thinks that you're biased towards your adopted son. You've already done those 2 things. What's the point of doing these things to this extent? Imperial Mother, you don't have to worry about me. Noble consort Su smiled. That's right, Yuan. Imperial Mother heard that you asked for a secret skin-nourishing recipe from the Luo family's 3rd young miss and prepared to give it to Imperial Mother. Imperial Mother has been waiting, but I haven't seen it until today. I forgot. Li Hongyuan said indifferently. Noble consort Su covered her mouth and laughed because she felt her son's awkwardness. That Luo family's 3rd young miss is really too much. If you didn't ask her for it, she wouldn't have taken the initiative to give it to you. She took the initiative to give it to me? Does she still want her reputation? All right, remember to give it to Imperial Mother to try. Imperial Mother sees that Luo family's third young Mrs. Skin is so good that I have nothing to say. I know. Li Hongyuan was a bit impatient. Women are troublesome. Little brat, what are you saying? Noble consort Su raised her hand and patted him. Li Hongyuan frowned and resisted the urge to avoid it. Seeing that her son was really annoyed, noble consort Su refused to let him go. Imperial Mother looks, Yuan, her skin is also good. As a man, your skin is a bit darker. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to escape being a natural beauty. Li Hongyuan's face darkened. Imperial Mother, that's enough. Noble consort Su couldn't help but laugh. Li Hongming looked at the two of them joking intimately as if there was no one else around. And he was like an outsider. If there was someone who didn't know, who would think that he was noble consort Su's biological son. He clearly knew that the reason for these things was that Imperial Mother had strict requirements for him to be the heir apparent, but she was truly raising Li Hongyuan as her son. But he still couldn't help but feel jealous. Li Hongyuan had taken all of Imperial Father's indulgence and doting, and Imperial Mother's care and love. Even if Imperial Mother had promised him that Imperial Father would pass the throne to anyone but Li Hongyuan, what could he do? He had received too much, so much that it was unbearable. He had to wait until Imperial Father passed away to clean up. But other than enduring, he could only endure. Li Hongming's throat moved, swallowing down the bitterness and unwillingness. Li Hongyuan didn't need to look to understand. He sneered in his heart. Noble consort, His Majesty, had people send Luo family's third young miss out of the palace. He also sent people to Kunyi Palace to pick up old Madame Luo. Noble consort Su was surprised. So fast. It seems that there's an emergency. I see. If it was an emergency, then it was no wonder. When it came to emergency, everything else had to be put aside. His Majesty actually directly sent her out of the palace. It seems that he doesn't want to leave her in the harem for us to meet alone. What do you think His Majesty means? Could it be that he had some thoughts? Imperial Mother, Imperial Father wouldn't be so out of line. Li Hongyuan interrupted her. If he really had such thoughts, even if it was his father, Li Hongyuan, he wouldn't be able to avoid committing regicide and killing his father. Anyone who tried to snatch her away from him, no matter who they were, would become his enemy and be killed without mercy. All right. After all, this girl isn't the daughter of a local official. Your Imperial Father hasn't held a draft for many years. The young and beautiful girls in the harem were basically sent here by the local officials. Noble consort Su said with a cold smile. That's why I say that women are troublesome. Your patience with women can never exceed 7 days. Ken will leave first. Li Hongyuan impatiently turned and left. Yuan, I'll go get the secret recipe for you. Imperial consort Su smiled. Her son probably didn't have much patience for the same woman. However, as his mother, she had always been an exception. Even when he was young and was so irritable that he smashed things, he would still listen to her until the end. Although he would respond impatiently and act as if he had forgotten about it, in reality, he would remember everything clearly. Li Hongming remained silent. If he opened his mouth now, he would probably only be scolded. Li Hongyuan rudely stopped Jingwan. Third Miss Luo, don't you still owe this prince something? Jingwan nodded. Prince, can you send someone to the Luo family to get it later? No need. You can open a shop yourself. It's really useful. This prince will take the things and directly send them to the palace. How much money do you want? Tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands? It's up to you. What this prince lacks the least is money. https://11/1187/6653023. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.